Number one, Marmaduke fan here. I've got a compare and contrast between two artists. A little bit ago I read Thanos on the Bus and I threw maximum respect at Germán Peralta, but I did notice that Peralta used entirely full page bleeds on every single page, and this at times affected the pace of the story and made the pace of the story move too quickly. And there was actually, I found one really good moment in it. Let's go look for it. Kind of look over here so I don't get a copyright strike for showing too much. It was here. Okay. Thum, the sound effect filling up everything, and one white box around this. So even though this is one consistent picture, by putting a black and a white box around these two here, it's slowing you down and isolating this moment in time, helping you feel the impact of this. If this was all one interrupted picture, the timing wouldn't feel right. You'd read this all in a second, boom, right to the next page. But by slowing you down right here, it helps you feel almost like you are intaking your breath the second that this impact creates a sound boom shaking over the characters. So Peralta knows that using a gutter here is slowing the reader down and helping create fine timing, but then doesn't use that throughout the rest of the book, which I suppose gives it a consistently boom, 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 staccato, moving fast style. But in every fight, there should be kind of moments of ebb and flow, of high speed, and then a moment for the reader to breathe and take in what they've been reading. It helps the reader feel like they got a little bit more bang for their buck because they slowed down and appreciated the art in certain pages. I'm not going to show those right now because I've already given maximum respect to Peralta, but I think this issue would have benefited from a bit more of the way of thinking about the gutters that Yildiray Cinar is using. I am almost 100% sure Yildiray Cinar is using traditional brushwork entirely, even though it's possible to simulate that with digital tools. These days, the tells of traditional tools are on every page of this, even in some of the boxes. So you'll see they don't quite line up perfectly as they would if you were using Photoshop to box your art. And I look at this. Cinar's a throwback. This is a throwback to an older age of comics, really, with entirely traditional tools, a much more simple, straightforward way of thinking about panels and gutters. This feels like an older comic, but there will still be moments where we'll get the full page bleeds, we'll have the art extending out, and this contrast helps. It helps create rhythm. Read Will Eisner's 3 textbooks, and I think it was, it might have been the first one. It might have been Graphic Storytelling and Visual Narrative, where Eisner talked about timing and how the way the images are drawn affects the timing that you're reading it in. It's rhythm. Now, I'm not a music theory guy or a music student or anything, but you know just from listening to music the difference of something that's going 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and then something that's maybe going ba-dum 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 ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then boom 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 ba-da-da-da. That's interesting. Boop 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 boop. That's not as interesting a rhythm to maintain for a whole book. The variety, the fast moments, and the slow moments. You create that with the art and with space, and in comics with the gutter, because the gutter is a negative space where the eye breathes in between appreciating all these images arranged together. So this is, once I said that manga kind of helped influence American comics and having creative use of panels, obviously there have been many Western artists who have also experimented with the use of panels. Why Eisner's an example. Eisner almost kind of laid the groundwork in his textbooks that comic artists would read about how to use panels and how to think about panels and break out of the standard use of panels deliberately for artistic effect and for storytelling effect. So here's an example of, the bad guy bursting forward, some rectangular panels, some very skinny horizontal panels, some panels layering on top of each other to make a visually dynamic page, and then back to boop, 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 boop. This sets up, this is kind of a little mini exposition. When people use the term exposition, they're usually talking about the first act of a movie, but comics, exposition isn't just for the little beginning part of the story. Every little moment where there's rising and falling action has an exposition. This is the exposition of an action scene. It gets right to the climax with the 2-page spread, maximum respect to Marvel Comics, and then back to kind of the standard rhythm, panel, panel. But even here, a little moment where the panel shrinks, putting more emphasis on the gun and the force of the shot being fired. And I even like how the colorist has reinforced this very strong horizontal motion here. Skip a little. All right, 3 vertical panels. In contrast to some of the manga I've talked about, these aren't, this isn't doing anything kind of goofy or experimental with diagonal panels and maybe having a lot of diagonal vertical lines shaking up everything. But these really tall vertical panels still reinforce the motion of these bad guys dropping from above onto our man Cable. And then here's yet another straightforward set of panels. So what sells it then has to be the art within it. So crowd of bad guys attacking the hero, crowd of bad guys filling up the panel with black, almost filling the entire panel with black. It's building, it's progressing, and the strong silhouettes are what help your imagination see what's going on underneath all the fists and feet pounding poor Cable.